right, welcome back inside the No Morning Show. I think we should have everything sorted out right now, and we're going to be chatting with the chairman of UTT, Professor Clement Imbird. Good morning to you, Professor.
Good morning, sir. But my name is Francis
Imba, sorry. My humblest apologies. All right, so
That's
tell me how has UTT been coping through this pandemic? What are some of the changes and transitions that you guys have had to make?
Well, from the point of view of teaching, we had to very quickly transition into the online mode.
Mm-hmm.
We have had the same difficulty as everybody else has had with staff not being able to come out, staff being on rotation. By staff, I mean not the students, of course. The teaching staff is not an issue because everything was done online, so they could do it from wherever they were.
Right.
But when you have systems that have been organized and geared for people on the ground, it's not very easy to transition to work from home. Many people claim they don't have connectivity or devices and things like that. We have had to assist in that area. And even so, most offices, as I say, and most institutions are not prepared for that. So suddenly, it has been a feature of work for some time, but very few organizations have really got really into it big way. So we have had the same difficulties that many people have had. Because a lot of the work that goes on in any organization, including an educational organization, is administrative. And you need people to deal with various things. We had to ensure that certain people were out, for instance, as it has happened in all organizations or most organizations. The people who deal with payroll and things like that, we have had to have them out in more than the usual rotational type of things. So hats off to these people because people have been paid on time and other bills that we can't pay have been paid. It has been difficult as it has been everywhere. But as far as as I said, the teaching is concerned, we had to get very, very quickly into the online mode, and the students in the university are more mature. And also, you don't come to university because you have to, like people who are in primary school and secondary school. You more or less have to. So some people are not as incentivized to latch on to the online instruction. At university, people are very often paying much more. They are mature and so on. So it didn't have a problem of some people having devices because again, they did not live from having to.
All right, Professor, we're having some connectivity issues. I think your internet is giving some trouble. I'm not sure if it's yours or ours. Or there's an internet problem, so we're missing out on some of what you're saying. But I think I'm getting the gist of what you're saying, which is that, UTT has had similar problems as everybody else in terms of having to transition online so quickly at the start of the pandemic. But we're 16 months in now, so I assume that by now there's been some, regularization, there's been some comfort to begin from being able to go online and have access to the various platforms that the students and the teachers would need. And yes, administrative staff would have to continue coming out on rotational or more than rotational basis to make sure things like payroll and bills were happening. Were there any other specific things that happened that would have had to increase costs? Is going online, putting the school online, putting classes online, was there an increased cost to the university to do that?
Absolutely. Now, I have been having meetings regularly online, and I haven't had many issues. So I suspect the internet problems are at your end. So if you want to continue this by telephone, we can do that. You can ensure that you're hearing all that I'm saying.
I'm hearing you good for now, so you can go ahead.
All right. Okay, fine. First of all, what I did say is that the question of students logging in online, their willingness to do so was not the issue. What the issue is that some of them did not have connectivity or devices,
Right.
as has happened in all educational institutions. Um, all right, so you asked about the increase in fees. But let me say from the outset that there was some miscommunication in that the proposed hike in fees was supposed to be communicated to the students before actual implementation. And so the university went ahead when they got no feedback because there was a delay and, as I said, miscommunication. However, the feedback came fast and furious once the university announced that it had intended to do this. And as is saw in newspapers, in news stories and the commentaries and so on. As a result, the management of the university met with the official student body, the GED, and decided to roll out the increase over the next few years.
And this increase, Professor, is just for registration fees or is it also tuition?
Tuition fees are not charged by tertiary institutions, well, the public tertiary institutions in Trinidad and Tobago. We are not allowed tuition fees. Well, I shouldn't say that. GATE used to pay most of the fees of everybody, but because the state, of course, is going through the same issues of money as everybody else, the state has instituted certain conditions for GATE so that you can only get 100% GATE if you are really in dire need, and it goes down to 50% and 25 and 0 and so on. So yes, people have to pay tuition fees if GATE does not pay it, but there's no rise in tuition fees.
Okay.
We are not allowed, so to speak, to increase tuition fees unilaterally. These registration fees, which have not, and these cover a lot of different things, services that we have to provide to the students. Now, firstly, it must be understood that these fees were not increased for at least a dozen years. Secondly, and very importantly, with online teaching, the university had to pay considerably larger license fees for the platforms that we use, such as Canvas and Zoom, as well as, again, considerable expenditure on extra hardware and other software. A fully online system has to be more reliable and more robust with backup systems and all our, as I said, so therefore hardware, software, and everything else connected with that had to be ramped up. Laboratory and other software and supplies have also increased considerably with, there are fewer students that are able to be accommodated in a lab at any given time and so on. So it was mainly those areas where we had considerable millions of dollars of increase.
Okay. How often do people have to pay registration fees? Is it you register for school once and that's it, or you register every semester?
No. Every semester.
Okay. Okay. And I understand that there was a meeting, I believe it was yesterday, with the students, and you guys agreed to a 3-year implementation plan?
Well, for now, yes. This year, the increase is going to go from 440 to 600. And as I had said before, when I was first interviewed by The Guardian, when they sort of caught me by surprise, but I never run from any kind of interviews or answering questions. They can pay this as throughout the year so that it will cost less than $100 a month, because I think it's a cash flow issue would have arisen for people to pay it one time as they register, but they can pay this, and with the $600 fee over the academic year, that's less than $100 a year.
All right. So then, Professor, if somebody was to register, not pay entirely, they say, all right, you pay monthly. What happens if they don't finish the payment before the end of the semester?
What universities normally do is they give students a chance. It doesn't make sense. I don't want to use the word expel. We hardly expel people at the level of university, although it does happen, but it's very rare. as I say, university people are mature and so on. They don't have the problems in the university that they have in many high schools and so on. So that when people don't pay, and this is generally speaking of universities, when they don't pay, we allow them to continue and very often even to do the exams. And I tell them, well, listen, we will not release your results unless, and well, they won't be able to go forward. We'll not release your results unless you clear your finances.
Yeah,
It's
outstanding
called a
bills.
financial hole. There are many kinds of holes in university, and one of them is a financial hole.
All right. Fantastic. Now, before we go, we don't have much time, unfortunately, because of all the technical difficulties. But can you tell us some of the sources of income for UTT? Because I imagine that, like you said, all of these $1 million increases that you have had to incur, where does the money come from?
Well, other than primary and secondary school, which is state sponsors in almost all countries, tertiary education institutions depend largely on fees. And I will tell you something, in most developing countries, I mean, Germany has a lot of free tertiary education, but there's no free tertiary education in many of the North America, for instance. Many more scholarships. But tertiary education institutions depend largely on fees. And in developing countries, particularly small ones, there ain't many other avenues for income generation. In the more industrialized countries, or the so-called developed world, as we say, income comes from large grants from both the private and public sectors. And these grants are for research projects and things like that. Some institutions fund the whole schools because they want to work from the engineering school, for example, to flow into their innovation and so on. Then there are endowments and royalties from patents and other sources like that. Now, one of the issues that we have been battling with UTT is that UTT is still a company. UTT has not been incorporated by Act of Parliament. We don't have a non-for-profit, but we need something a little better than that sort of charitable status. So endowments are not as readily offered to UTT as other places. In fact, UTT is the only public tertiary institution that doesn't benefit from certain exemptions, financial exemptions. We are trying our best to write that, to get that done properly. So there are many sources of income, and this is not UTT, this is not to the UTT. UTT is a relatively young institution, 15 years. This is all universities in developing countries, and certainly in the Caribbean. You depend on government subventions, including fees in Trinidad and Tobago, which are to a large extent paid by the government through GATE, but a certain extent paid through GATE.
All right. Well, Chairman, I want to thank you so much for joining us this morning. Unfortunately, we have to take a leave here, but I do look forward to seeing the university being able to be having opportunities to earn income from other places besides just tuition fees. I think it would benefit, the entire population a lot better. So thank you very much, Professor Clement Imber, the chairman of UTT, for sharing that information with us. We take a quick break and come back with more inside in our morning show. Stay tuned.